Luno, the fastest, easiest way to buy Bitcoin. If you're just getting into crypto, it's the perfect place to start. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Layah Heilpern show. I have a very exciting guest today. Meltem, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Layah?
I'm good, thank you. Before we jump in, this is powered by Icon Plus Capital. They're a VC firm, very cool. And it's also sponsored by BlockFi. You can get up to $250, I think, when you sign up. Interest rates are great, which I think we need right now. So go check them out. Meltem, thanks for joining me. Whereabouts are you right now?
I am in New York, and I am about to head to the epicenter of the Bitcoin shit show this week. I'm about to head to Miami, and it's so funny, Layah. I haven't been to an event like this in 18 months.
Right.
I don't know how to act around large groups of people. So I wonder if I'm just going to walk into big groups of people and just be so weird. I mean, that was already the case, but I feel like it's going to be amplified. So we'll see.
No, I think everybody's feeling the same way. It's like the first conference in so long. And I think people have been in lockdown for ages, depending on which country you're flying in from, which state you're flying in from. And people just have some kind of like weird Stockholm syndrome where they kind of don't want to go out, but they have to go out now. I think it's going to be strange. I'm with you.
Well, I think it's going to be a really interesting week. I mean, what's interesting is around this time of year, we would typically have the consensus conference hosted by CoinDesk in New York.
Yeah.
And I remember that was always such a major event and would always coincide with a major market rally. We called it the consensus pump. So it'll be interesting to see. Right now on the fear versus greed index, we're in the extreme fear sort of range. And so it'll be interesting to see if people getting together with all of their favorite Bitcoiners and talking about Bitcoin will sort of help alleviate some of the fears. But the bears are out in full force right now, and I don't understand.
Okay, so I was going to ask you this a little bit later, but since you brought it up, let's just go for it now. What are your thoughts on the current market? Is this the end of the bull cycle, or are we sort of just finding out, market value and things are calming down, or are we sort of heading head first now into a bear market?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and one that I think everyone's asking themselves right now. I don't have a crystal ball. If I did, I'd be really rich, but I don't. The only thing I would say, I mean, there's sort of three things we need to look at. So first of all, Bitcoin doesn't exist in isolation, right? So if we look at the broader macro context right now, there's a lot of fear in regular equities markets and other markets as well. Obviously, since the start of COVID, markets have sort of been in disarray. Last year, we saw the decoupling of core equities versus tech, right? Value versus growth, with value lagging since core equities were hit really hard by the pandemic and reduced demand. Tech saw massive growth, right? And some of the valuations in the tech sector. I mean, if you remember when Zoom IPO'd for a long time, trading at a 1500x forward EPS multiple, right? So that's like, 1500x forward PE multiple. So 1500x price to earnings multiple, meaning the stock was valued at 1500 times their actual expected fiscal year earnings. So that, I think is a clear example of some separation from reality there. Tesla similarly, Nikola, which is an electric car company that's never produced a single electric car, was valued at over, I think, $60 billion at one point. I mean, right, it's sort of preposterous. Over the last 3 months, what we've seen as the economy starts to reopen, as our world starts to reopen, I think there's still a lot of fear. Institutions have pulled back capital. There's now over $3 trillion of dry powder on the sidelines. At its peak in May of 2020, it was about 3.2 trillion. So we're getting close to record highs of dry powder, unallocated cash on the sidelines. And to me, the real question is, where is that capital going to flow once allocators start allocating again? What's interesting, though, is there's a divergence between institutions and between retail. So let me just highlight what this means in macro markets and how that applies to crypto, because it's really interesting, right? Like my job and what we do at CoinShares, we look at data. Data tells us about sentiment. Sentiment informs demand, and demand informs where the market heads, right? It's not always a clear-cut sort of interpretation, but using data to inform your perspective, I think, is one of the core skills you can have in this space. So if we look at the macro side, right, I just explained to you that institutions have been really, really bearish, right? They're pulling back cash. They're uncertain about what's going to happen to rates. They're uncertain about tax implications. So they've pulled back cash and they're waiting to deploy. So institutions are taking risk off of the table in the broader equities market. Retail, not the case, right? Yeah. Retail is on the extreme greed part of the spectrum. Retail is risk on. And we see this with retail being allocated to AMC, GameStop, and a number of really high risk speculative stocks. But we see it across the spectrum. Retail has been deploying capital, has been very actively investing and taking on more risk. Retail also is participating in the market far more than they ever have at any point in market history, which is really important. So let's go over to crypto, right? So there's this backdrop where like the big money is scared and they're like, oh, we don't know what we're going to do. They're waiting, right? They're waiting for the other shoe to drop. But retail's like, hey, let's go. Like, we're in a pandemic. I haven't been working. Everyone's getting rich. I'm not.
Nothing to lose.
Yeah, fuck it, right? All in. Chips all in. Okay, so how does this tie to crypto? We're seeing the exact same thing in crypto. May 19th was the single busiest spot trading day in the history of the crypto ecosystem. If we look at activity, right, on the institutional quote unquote platforms, which tend to be US dollar denominated, so on Coinbase, Gemini, et cetera, activity, right, has been way down in terms of participation on the Bitcoin side over the last 5 months. If we look at the non-US exchanges, the crypto to crypto venues where a wider range of assets are offered, right, where people go to trade the long tail of coins, we see record levels of participation, record levels of inflows and outflows on Binance throughout the end of May, right? Retail is participating, whether they're buying or they're selling, they're trading this market, they're really active. The other thing I'll note is at CoinShares, we track weekly fund flows. So all of the money moving into and out of crypto-related ETPs, funds, publicly listed products. Our biggest, 40% of our business roughly is our asset management business. We have passive crypto ETPs in the market. We've done that since 2015. And we have about 5 billion in assets under management there. So we track inflows and outflows on a weekly basis. I can flip you the link, but it's on our blog. We publish it every week. It's a great resource. Over the last 3 weeks, for the first time since we started that report, and honestly, for the first time since we started our business, right, we saw net outflows. So historically, we've had a pattern of net inflows or no activity. Obviously, for the last 12 months with way more funds and ETFs in different markets launching, we now have a lot more data to look at. It used to be just our own data, but now there's, way wider range of market participants. But what we saw is in the middle of May, first week of outflows, 15 million of net outflows from Bitcoin ETPs. Last week, over 100 million of outflows. And 2 weeks ago, 100 million. And this last week, another week of net outflows. It was in early May, it was just outflows from Bitcoin products. There were still inflows into Ethereum products and other ETP products. This past week, we saw outflows across all product lines. So again, if we look at the data, right, people are taking their money out of the market. People are putting money on the sidelines. And then I'll add one last data point that's really important. The amount of USDC and USDT and stablecoin last week on Wednesday for the first time crossed the $100 billion mark. Right. I think over the last 5 days alone, we've printed close to $3 billion worth of USDC, which is roughly, I think, 20%, close to 20% of the overall market cap of USDC. So what we're seeing in the crypto space as well is that similar behavior that I described on the macro side, where people are going risk off. People are feeling skittish. They're taking money off the table and they're waiting to figure out where the bottom is before they redeploy. But I don't think we're in a bear market or about to enter a bear market. And here's why. Sentiment is more bullish than ever. If you listen to what's happening in the media, if you look at the institutions that are participating, if you look at the products that are coming to market, if you look at the way people are initiating coverage on crypto equities, if you look at the way that people are initiating sell side and buy side research coverage on the crypto asset class as a whole, right? Goldman Sachs is writing reports about DeFi. Like that's not bear market things. I think what we have is a correction. Bitcoin, since the start of the year, started at 20-year, trebled to 65K, has settled at around 35. We're still up a lot, right? Ether started the year at around 1,000, trebled, ran all the way to 4,500, now is resting at around 2,500. I think where we are is a pullback. We tend to see pullbacks and consolidation when the market gets overheated. And honestly, like we can't have up only. I know that we want it to up only, but these markets are volatile. And I think this is a correction. I think we need to wait to see macro sort of stabilize and people get a sense of direction and a heading. But people are sitting on the sidelines with cash. Long-term holders are buying these dips. I know, I've been excited that Bitcoin's on sale, not investment advice, but some of us are excited about the dips. And what we see right now is fear and pain, but I'm convinced that a crypto summer is coming.
Yeah, I think I think right now is such an interesting time because, like you said, okay, so we've had this 50% pullback. It looks like a bear market, but you're right, sentiment is crazy right now. With the senator of Wyoming, Goldman Sachs, like you said, just so much is happening. But I want to go back just a little bit because I've watched a lot of your stuff, follow a lot of your stuff, and I think you speak so eloquently on the topic.
Thank you, Layah. I appreciate
it's my pleasure. No, it's my pleasure. But honestly, I see you all over like the American news and everything. So how did you get into crypto? Like, where did your grounding start? Because I know that was it oil and gas and things like that before. So where did you accumulate so much knowledge?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Okay.
It's really funny. Like people have different things that they care about, right? Like some people care about money. Some people care about fame. Some people care about power. I'm driven by knowledge, and I always have been, which is so weird. Like when I was a kid, actually, my dad will appreciate this story. When I was a kid, I grew up in the Netherlands, right? Do you remember Encyclopedia Britannica, Layah?
No.
Okay.
What is that?
What is that? Okay. I'm such a loser. It's hilarious. Okay. So Encyclopedia Britannica, when I was growing up in the early 90s, right, was basically this. So there was no Wikipedia, right? Like the internet really wasn't a thing. I didn't have an internet connection in my house when I was a child, but I had a computer. Like I would play Doom and all sorts of, and Prince of Persia, like was my favorite game of all time as a kid. But there was no internet. So the way that you got knowledge, when I was a kid, my dad's a scientist, so I would read a lot of Isaac Asimov books, right? Both fiction and nonfiction, but I really liked the nonfiction books. And so there was this encyclopedia set called Encyclopedia Britannica. And they're like these red leather-bound books with the gold foil around the edge of the pages. And they look really like posh, really fancy. And as a kid, I remember I wanted the encyclopedia set so badly. It was like 50 books. It probably cost an obscene amount of money, but I wanted it so badly. And I would just hound my parents and be like, Mom, Dad, like, I don't want toys. Fuck toys. I want this encyclopedia set. And so I got the encyclopedia set and I spent most of my childhood reading encyclopedias like a nerd because I loved knowledge. Like my dad would come into my room at 2 a.m. and I'd be reading my encyclopedias in bed with a flashlight and he'd be like,
oh no,
you need to go to sleep. Like other kids would get grounded for making trouble. I would get in trouble for reading encyclopedias. My parents would be like, you need to sleep, child. And I was like, oh, knowledge. So I think just being like a sponge and always wanting to know things, right? Like, why does that work that way? How does that
Yeah.
happen? What's the precedent here? Like, why do we do that way? I'm sure I was the most infuriating and most annoying child. I had a lot of questions. But that's sort of persisted. And I think in a space like Bitcoin, right, that type of behavior is rewarded. So I'm glad
Yes.
that I'm in this space where like something that has historically been perceived as a character flaw is now a character strength. So
Yeah, I think no, I think being driven by knowledge is like it's a gift. It's the most amazing thing. Because you are so knowledgeable in it. And I absolutely enjoy every time your stints pop up on my Twitter. I really enjoy. I learned so much from it. Um
but
but
it's
you were
also a
mentioning,
curse.
yeah,
It's
go
a
on.
curse also, right?
No,
It's
it's
a
not. I don't
curse.
believe it. How is it a curse?
Okay, because like last night, normal people, right, having a 7 a.m. podcast would have gone to bed at like 11 or midnight. I stayed up because I call them in, I call them like black holes where I will
Yeah.
literally like, my mind will meld with the subject matter I'm reading about, or like my mind will just like meld with my computer. And I looked up last night, it was 2 a.m. and I was reading, I was on a random topic hunt, like a
What was
knowledge.
it? What was it?
I was in a deep black hole about the history of ticker tapes. I love market structure. I love market history. So I was reading about like ticker tapes, and
That's
there's
cool.
this great book from the 30s called Confessions of Confessions from the Ticker Tape or something. So I was reading about ticker tapes, and
Good.
I was like,
No,
oh,
I think
it's
it's great.
it's 2 a.m. I need to go the fuck to sleep.
No, I think it's great. Sometimes I do that. Like I have an obsession with space. It just sounds the most ridiculous thing, but I'm just fascinated by all of it, by wormholes, black holes, time travel. So no, I'm the
Yeah.
same. I can stay up until like 3 a.m.
Like, do you have do not go websites? Like for me, Wolfram Alpha, which is a math
No, I don't.
website, is like I can't go there. If I go there, that's like 7 hours minimum. Do not go website. Wikipedia,
Okay.
do not go website. Like it can't, because they'll just start clicking, right?
Yes.
Wikipedia is the worst for people like me who have like severe OCD. I don't know what I have, but I have something. My parents, I was so funny story. I did a puzzle with my parents recently.
Yeah.
And when I puzzle, I get into the same state. Like I get obsessed and I see a piece and I know exactly where it goes. And my parents are both sitting there because I basically did the puzzle by myself. And they were like,
Yeah.
what's wrong with you? Like there's something really wrong with you that we didn't figure out when you were a kid. But like this is not normal behavior. I was like, I know.
No, I think it's great. I think it's winning. I think it's winning behavior. If anything, that's what it is.
It's weird.
No, it is. It is. But okay, so you mentioned earlier that you think that right now things are very much retail driven.
Yeah.
So we've definitely seen that the most I think than we've ever seen compared to any bull market. Especially, I know it's obviously not crypto, but with like AMC, GME, and that kind of attitude towards Doge. So why? Now, like, why would you say now retail investors are particularly I wouldn't call it angry, but particularly passionate and ready to sort of take on the system?
They're active, right? Retail's very active. And you know what's so fun, Layah, is like
Yeah.
historically when so I remember like when I was a teenager, I got into trading stocks for a very brief period of time. But stock trading's always been boring. Like stocks are so boring, right? You like buy a couple shares of Exxon, where I used to work.
Wait,
And
what's boring? Is it the lack of volatility in comparison to crypto?
it's not only the lack of volatility, it's the limited access that retail has historically had to more sophisticated instruments, right? And so historically, right, most people, their only interaction with investing would be through their 401k or their IRA. And typically what they're doing, right, is they're going on whatever platform they have and they're buying a target date fund, right? Like a target 2050 retirement date fund. And so those funds are allocated according to risk, right? So if you're going to retire in year 2050, it's now year 2021. You can afford to take a lot more risk because you have 29 years till you're going to retire. Whereas if you have a target 2030 fund, like that's only 9 years, so it's going to be a much lower risk profile. So a bigger portion of that portfolio is going to be bonds. So there's, again, nothing exists in isolation. So confluence of factors here. Number one most important factor in my view is technology.
Okay.
Financial technology and fintechs in particular have made it easier for investors to access markets. And the way this manifests itself in crypto is in the 2017, and by the way, also the reason crypto is way more volatile and also is going to be way more correlated to tech equities in the coming years is this. It used to be that if I wanted to trade crypto in 2017, I would have to get sign up for a crypto exchange, figure out a way to get Bitcoin, right? And it was really only Bitcoin that was used as the primary funding mechanism. In 2017, I'd have to figure out a way to get Bitcoin. I'd probably get it on Coinbase or Kraken or something, but really mostly Coinbase then. I would get my Bitcoin. I would take that Bitcoin. I would send it to what were the exchanges then? Like KuCoin or
Okay. Yeah.
one of these platforms. And I would trade crypto there, and it was all crypto to crypto. Today, if I want to trade crypto, I don't even have to leave the app where I'm trading stocks. I can trade cryptocurrencies inside of Robinhood. I can trade them inside of SoFi, Cash App, you name them, any number of applications, eToro, right? Which, like, congrats to Yoni for going public. Any of these fintech platforms, like now crypto is just part of the normal slate of options that you have in the menu. So in 2017, couldn't trade crypto easily, really difficult to move money in and out. Now, right, I can trade my AMC, my GameStop, my Dogecoin, and my CumRocket like all in the same account, which is pretty.
Oh, and you forgot Askcoin as well.
How dare I? How dare I? And I say that not to be cheeky, but technology really is the primary driver of this changed behavior. Number one. Number two, let's talk. So that's like the mechanical reason why. So, but markets are just a way for people to express their sentiment, right? So the tools now exist for retail consumers to easily express their sentiment, which is why we increase participation. But what's driving that sentiment? Retail is tired of getting fucked. I do think that investing is a new form of entertainment. During the pandemic, people looked at volatility in tech equities and they realized, wait a minute. There's this whole thing going on over here that I haven't been paying attention to. But while the government is busy printing, right, the dollar into oblivion, what am I going to do? One of the biggest challenges, and we wrote a great piece on this as a corporate treasurer, right? I identify with this as a former corporate treasurer, I should say. I identify with this. Rates are down, right? So real interest rates are zero. I get paid nothing for loaning my money to a financial institution. Money market funds, which were long considered no risk or like very, very low risk investments as cash equivalents, yield zero. Inflation, right, is 2.5% target, but realistically it's probably a bit higher than that, double if not treble that, depending on what, but we could talk about how inflation measures are whack. But here you are, you're sitting here, you're losing spending power every year if you're not investing. And I think people are starting to wake up to that reality. The other big driver is education, right? FinTwit or financial Twitter, influencers or financial influencers, right? There's so many amazing people who are super smart, super knowledgeable, who are putting out great content. Like, look at you doing this podcast. So the fact that people have access to really high quality research, insights, advice, that's never existed before. It used to be that you had to be, a person with a private banker or a person with a broker in order to get sound financial advice and in order to get really high quality sell-side research. Now is open to everyone, right? The model for information in financial services is democratizing information, making it widely accessible. The rise of financial Twitter has been really interesting to watch. And then the last piece is, so you have sentiment, right? So education, changing macro market conditions. People are then expressing that sentiment through these new technology tools that we have, where it's really so much easier to access these markets. People can trade options in an app. Like the first time I traded options in an app, I was like, no, this is crazy. But you can, right? It's wild. So you have sentiment. Sentiment gets expressed in the market through this new technology. We have these new capabilities. And then the last piece I think that's really important is just the gamification of everything, right? My thesis has always been like anything and everything is a market. Anything and everything is a financial asset, because at the end of the day, right, markets are just sentiment machines, which is why, again, it's for me always so interesting to go back to sentiment as the driver. Sentiment enables, sentiment is enabled by technology, which is why I spend a lot of time thinking about market structure and how changes in market structure are going to impact the way that people express their sentiment. And then that expression of sentiment obviously is going to lead to sort of changes in markets and prices themselves. And then the last piece I think that's so interesting, again, gamification of everything. Everything is becoming a market. We're going to see all sorts of esoteric markets emerging. Definitely one of the themes we're building around at CoinShares is digitization of everything, and then distribution evolving where there's no longer an intermediary, right? So again, it used to be if I wanted to construct a portfolio, I'd buy a portfolio constructed by Vanguard or Charles Schwab or, Fidelity, whoever my service provider is, and I'd buy their, tech sector fund, or I'd buy their, target date 2050 fund. I'd be like, okay, this is good. I'm going to make it. And I think people now are looking at this and they're like, not going to make it. That's NGI. Yeah. And so people are taking much more ownership. That has bad impacts, right? Like there's negative impacts and positive impacts. But my view is any time that people are incentivized and motivated to learn and take accountability for their financial well-being, like that's positive in my book. The fact that I went through 18 years of schooling, and I never learned how to balance a checkbook. I never really learned how to construct a portfolio, but I learned the laws of thermodynamics and how many molecules are in, a milliliter of something, it's wild. I learned all of these things, but I didn't learn the most basic things. I think one of the fundamental things people need to know so that they can take accountability and responsibility is how to manage their finances. And what worked in the past is not going to work going forward because the world's not a static place. A lot of people have this assumption that there are absolute maxims. There aren't, right? The universe is constantly changing. Entropy is real. All things tend towards chaos. We're going through a phase of exceptionally high entropy right now. And again, this is why knowledge is power. You have to understand the fundamentals of how things work in order to survive in a wide variety of market conditions. And what I worry about is, a bunch of people are about to retire. They're counting on retirement funds to be there, but what worked in the past is not going to work in the future. And we're entering into a whole new Wild West. And I think people who take the time and the effort and the courage, it takes courage to do this stuff. But the people who go down that path, I think, will be rewarded. We're in a world where no one's going to save us. So we have to save ourselves. I mean, that's why we're all in Bitcoin, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with everything that you said, and it is a completely different world. I remember even telling my dad when Tesla had put 1.5 billion into Bitcoin, he asked me, when are you selling? And I was like, you don't understand. What do you mean, when am I selling? This means you hold even tighter.
Well, what I always say is when we get to where we're going, you won't need to sell a Bitcoin.
To sell.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah, of course, because everyone's gonna adopt it. That's my goal anyway. But you're totally right when you talk about the fintechs, because in the UK we have Revolut. I'm not sure if you have that in the States yet, but in Europe we have Revolut. And actually today they just announced that they will now host more coins. So it's not just like Bitcoin, ETH, and XRP. I think it was. Now it's a whole load of other coins. But yeah, I mean, in 2017, you didn't have things like TikTok, for example. TikTok is huge at driving the market, which is absolutely insane if you think about it.
Yeah, but TikTok, right? But TikTok is just a medium, right? So the medium is not the message. The message is the message, right? Exactly. TikTok is just really good at spreading information. TikTok is really good at feeding you content that you didn't even know you wanted. So TikTok is really just really good at understanding your sentiment and what you like and keeping you on the platform. And then it just feeds you content. But the people creating content, right? There's this huge shift. Finfluencers, right? If I when I was growing up, finfluencer, finance influencer was not a thing.
I didn't know that was a thing. I've never heard the term finfluencer in my life.
My friends tease me and they call me a finfluencer. They're like, when are you you're a finfluencer, right? You're sponsored. You're sponsored.
Yeah.
Your podcast is supported by companies in the fintech space. But I think this idea, right? Here's what's really cool. 5 years ago, let's go back 5 years ago, right? When I first started in crypto, if I wanted to learn about Bitcoin, crypto Twitter wasn't really as big of a thing as it is now, but a lot of my early Bitcoin education came from going to Bitcoin Talk, right? Like Bitcoin Talk, Reddit, that's where I was hanging out. Maybe a little bit of 4chan, but like kind of sweep that under the rug.
We won't tell anyone.
But that, I think we just did tell everyone. But that's where like these conversations were happening today, right? If I want to learn about a variety of different topics, like I have different people that I follow in my feed. Like I have macro people. Lynn Alden is my number one macro person. Like she's so brilliant and I love reading her research. So I have macro people that I follow. Semiconductors, huge area of passion of mine. I have a bunch of semiconductor influencers that I follow. FX, right? And EM, emerging markets. So foreign exchange, FX, EM, emerging markets, FX and EM, another area I'm really interested in. There's a couple of people I follow. Robin Brooks is one of my favorites. He writes a lot about EM, particularly Turkey and the EMEA region. So being from there, like really interested and learn a lot from him. But there are all of these amazing people who are really credible, like well-credentialed people. Some of them are also self-taught and self-educated, which I love.
Most of them, I'd say, probably are, to be honest.
I think it's
in this kind of
industry. It's a mix, to be fair, right? Like a lot of people do have like really, really institutional quote unquote backgrounds. Like I have a very quote unquote institutional background. Like I have pieces of paper with my name on them from institutions that supposedly like mean something. But I also think what's really cool about FinTwit and Finfluencers and TikTok is like the democratization of credentialing. Like institutions no longer carry the weight that they did. It's about doing the work. And that's why I love crypto. Like crypto truly is a meritocracy. If I would have stayed in the energy industry, if I was a good girl and worked hard and was nice to my coworkers and did everything that my corporate overlords asked me to, like maybe at the age of 50, I would become an executive and I would make it. Like here I am, I'm in my mid-30s, I work in crypto, I'm crazy, I don't listen to anyone. I'm completely uncontrollable. And my company is publicly listed. And you know, it's in no other universe does that happen. But the fact that people can do this, the fact that like there are entrepreneurs out there who are just crushing it and doing incredible things and aren't credentialed, don't come from institutions. I absolutely love that. And what Bullish is doing with his 1729 project, which is a massive global talent and idea search, I think is so powerful. And I want to see more of that. Like, it's wild. It's so cool. You never know where brilliant ideas are going to come from, but they could come from anywhere. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. You know, I'm the first to say that university isn't necessary for everyone. I'm the first to say that. I mean, I study journalism, so I don't have an actual technical financial degree or anything like that. Totally just learning and going with the flow and sort of figuring it all out. But no, I'm totally with you. But earlier you mentioned about how this is a very much an trading is now entertainment, and we
which
know
might
that
not be a good thing, but like it's inevitable. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. Like fighting it is a fool's errand. It's inevitable, and people are mad about it. I see comments where they're like, TikTok and memes will erode any education. Like it's inevitable. So like the trend is your friend. You can spend your energy fighting trends, or you can embrace them.
Exactly. So the way I look at it is this is very much entertainment driven, and that's totally fine. As long as you're aware of it, then you can just understand it. Like you said, once you know the trend, it's your friend, and then you can monetize and go with that and do what you want to do, trade, buy Doge when it's down, whatever. So this leads me on to a subject that I really want to talk to you about, which is Elon Musk, because I know you have some views on this. Don't turn your head. I know you have some really good views on this, so I do want to ask you about it. There's two parts. Okay.
No. Let's hear it. Sorry.
So there's two parts going on here. There's the Doge part of it and the manifestation of meme coins. And then we can get onto the Bitcoin Mining Council, because I know you have stuff to say about that. But in terms of Doge and meme coins and things like that, do you think Elon Musk endorsing Doge, because that's 100% what he's done, endorsing Doge is dangerous or bad? Or is bad financial advice, although nothing is technically financial advice?
A lot of questions. Okay, let's just go back to Elon.
Okay.
Here is my take on Elon Musk. Elon Musk is the Kim Kardashian of Twitter. Here's what I mean by that. Kim Kardashian is the queen of Instagram. She's the queen of content, one of the most followed people on that platform. I think she has over 100 million followers, like some crazy amount. Elon Musk is the most followed person on Twitter, I believe, 70 million followers. So I think what we're doing here, like we're confusing cause and effect. Elon is not the cause of anything. Elon just happens to have a lot of followers, the most followers, I think, of anyone on Twitter. So he's a massive megaphone. Anything he tweets about is going to have 10,000 times more reach. He has more followers than probably all of Fintech combined. So
he's the definition of an influencer.
Yeah, but he's like the influencer. And Osmar, this is a track jacket. Thank you for noticing. I haven't worn a Gucci track jacket in a long time. So I'm excited about it. It's like, it's time. It's time for me to come out of my hiding hole and like be in the
it's good. It's good. Again. It works.
You know what? It was 7 a.m. Like I hadn't slept a lot because I was doing weird shit last night. It's fine. But Elon, right? Biggest influencer on Twitter. So naturally, anything that he tweets about is going to get massive distribution and pickup. And so, what really happened with Elon and Dogecoin, Doge was a thing before Elon Musk hopped on the bandwagon. And Elon Musk, like, I don't know what his motivations are. Honestly, I think he's a billionaire. He's bored. He loves chaos. Like, I'm a creature of chaos. So I know a creature of chaos when I see one. And I'm like, oh, this man, he likes chaos. He's just making chaos. Like, he's fucking with people. He's having fun. He's like, he doesn't care. So Elon's not the cause, but he is the amplification, right? Like, he's the massive megaphone, and anything that gets refracted through the Elon Musk sort of prism, right, is going to be a thing. So when Elon started talking about Dogecoin, like, and he's been doing this for a while, I think honestly, he just thought it was funny, like magical internet money, Shiba, hilarious, right? Like the whole thing is just funny. It's also a perfect encapsulation of the zeitgeist of the moment, right? If we look at what's happening in markets more broadly, like we live in clown world. Yeah. I say this all the time. Like we live in clown world, and it's sad, but also funny.
It's great.
And what's the quote? It's like the most preposterous or the most absurd outcome is the most likely. Right? Like we all kind of want to be entertained. We're also somewhat nihilistic, I think, like as a modern society. So so Elon, look, he's just a giant megaphone through which stuff is getting refracted. The issue we get into is I think when Elon started talking about Bitcoin, first of all, for someone who added $1.5 billion of Bitcoin to their balance sheet, the comments that he made about Bitcoin appeared to be really ill-informed, like demonstrating fundamental misunderstandings and misconceptions about how Bitcoin works. I think, again, for most people that would be fine, but if you're a technologist running two large, one publicly listed, one not publicly listed at very late stage, like companies, you kind of would think they would know some of these very basic things or do a little bit of work before they started tweeting about it, but clearly that wasn't done. And then with the Bitcoin Mining Council stuff, look, I get that the aspirations of the Bitcoin Mining Council are pure. I think anytime you start pandering to narratives, though, then the narrative starts to write the story. The issue I have with crypto generally, and I'm guilty of this myself, so this criticism I'm also leveling at myself. The issue I have is we let other people write stories about us. And here's the really interesting thing, and this is why history is so important. Mythology is part of how humans make meaning of a very confusing universe, right? We write stories and tell stories to try to understand and contextualize what's happening in a very complex world that's very difficult for us to understand. So what's happening right now in the crypto space is we are letting other people tell us stories about ourselves. We are letting other people from outside of our industry, people like Elon Musk, who yes, Elon Musk might be super smart. Yes, he might be super successful. Yes, he might be really interesting. But why the fuck are we letting some random person tell us what our industry is about? You become like what you say you are. The stories you tell yourself about yourself are the most powerful and fucked up stories. This is why a lot of people are in therapy. Like, this is why a lot of people need help, because they've been told these stories all of their lives. And the stories, the mythology that you're taught becomes reality. So the issue I have with the crypto community right now, like, who the fuck cares what Elon said? Literally, who cares? He is one of 8 billion people who live on this planet and one who's literally been in Bitcoin for like 6 months. And we're going to let this person write the story. No, you're doing it wrong. Elon is the megaphone that we use once we have the story we want. But it's up to us. Like, take some fucking personal responsibility. Tell the story that needs to be told. And again, this is why I love like the vision of Bitcoin. This is why I love what Alex Gladstein at the Human Rights Foundation is doing with rewriting the story around Bitcoin. This is why I love there are a couple of great documentaries coming out around Bitcoin in different parts of the Bitcoin ecosystem. We need to win hearts and minds. We need to write our own history. We need to write our own stories. Like, mythology is the most important thing. Storytelling is how we transmit narratives, messages, right? The memes are the message. Elon has captured this. The crypto community is kind of like fumbling over its feet. We need to start taking control of the narrative. I think we're starting to learn, but again, this is one of the challenges of Bitcoin, right? We don't have a marketing department. There's no central entity. No one speaks for Bitcoin. Bitcoin has no spokespeople, no masters. But what makes me sad is when I see Bitcoiners simping for people who like have literally done zero for the Bitcoin community. What we need to do is simp for people in our community who are actually driving the industry forward. And there are a ton of great people in the Bitcoin space who just show up every day and have shown up every day for the last 10 years and just do the work. Like, let's simp for some Bitcoin core devs instead of simping for a bored billionaire who's looking to keep himself in the news. And again, that's not a diss on Elon. Like, Elon's great, but I think we need to, again, just be more cognizant of how we create narratives, to take ownership of the narrative and to write the mythology of Bitcoin. Like, we need Bitcoin historians. That's why historians used to be like very revered in ancient cultures, because people realized reality, facts don't really matter. It's the story, right? What gets passed down throughout history is the story. And that's how memes perpetuate. And again, Elon, TikTok, all of these things, they're just megaphones through which we amplify the message, but the message itself, we have to take ownership of. Sorry, I get so riled up on this. It's whack. I'm just like, why are we doing this? We know how to do this.
Yeah, I think that he has, he's been in Bitcoin for 5 minutes. He's annoyed a lot of people. And for me, I just can't help but think and feel that it's not entirely he just didn't know. When he flip-flopped on energy. For me, I think there's more to it. A lot of people say, maybe he's bored, that's why he's pumping Doge. But maybe I'm giving him too much credit. Maybe I am, but whatever. For me, there's something more to it. And I'm intrigued to see what happens. I get the whole, he's hurting Bitcoin, which, he is, given his following and how he's just feeding into the FUD.
Yeah, but Layah, let me ask you a question though.
Yeah, go for it.
The fact that one person who has been in Bitcoin, as you said, for 5 minutes can damage the market's sentiment, is that not concerning?
Of course it is. No, it's absolutely concerning. It's supposed to be a decentralized ecosystem. So the fact that one person can move a market is concerning. What I'm saying is I think he's got something else.
But I think, again, we're giving this person too much power. Like, this person doesn't have this power. Actually, like Elon tweeting about Bitcoin, again, not the effect. Not the cause. He's the effect, right? He came after leverage getting unwound. That's a cause. Right? Institutional sentiment flipping bearish on macro in general. That's a cause. Tax day selling. That's a cause. Not fucking Elon Musk. That's an effect. Right? And so people are not understanding the basic dynamics of cause and effect. Cause, other factors, some endogenous to the Bitcoin ecosystem itself, some exogenous, right? Cause. Effect, Elon tweeting about it. He just has the most followers of anyone on the Bird website, i.e. Twitter, which is why people prescribe cause to him. But I think, again, what's so crazy to me is like we give our power away so easily. The power is in storytelling. Like every day I wake up, Layah, and I'm like, today we are going to do this. And if I just keep telling myself, like 7 years ago when I left a well-paying career to get into Bitcoin, I was like, this is going to be great. You're going to make it. Like, you got this. And I would tell myself these stories. I was like, it's gonna be great. Like
You have to.
when Bitcoin crashed, 70%, I was like, this is great. I love it here. But look, you have to believe in the power of storytelling, and you have to tell better stories. I'm like, let's just stop. So I'm really hopeful that we can get over the simping. But honestly, what I'm seeing is not encouraging. And this is the flip side, right? This is the flip side of the memification of finance.
So on the topic of storytelling, because I'm totally with you. I think it is so important, especially just on a personal level. Like you said, 7 years ago, you were like, it's gonna be great. It's so important. It's something I do myself all the time. But this market is still such an immature market, and it's largely narrative driven. And there's been a lot of interesting narratives coming out of China and many other exciting places. So you said that you've been here for about 7 years when you left your nice comfy cushy job. So FUD doesn't go away. It just keeps coming back. When I was doing I was really trying to get my head wrapped around the whole energy thing. So I started watching some Andreas videos from back in like 2016, 17, and it's this same conversation. So given you've been here for such a while, why is this still a thing? Like, why is this conversation still happening? And do you think we'll get to a point whereby we finally don't even need to discuss this anymore? Like, is Bitcoin a scam? I feel like we've kind of shut that one down.
No, but there will always be people who believe Bitcoin is a scam. Oh, Stephen
Yes.
just called me insane. Thank you, Stephen. I am insane. And if you don't believe in the power of storytelling, examine your own beliefs about the world and see how many of them are facts and how many of them are artistic reinterpretations of history. Like, the history you've been taught in school is basically storytelling. It's not based on fact, but cute.
I'm totally with you. I just want to say, no, I'm totally with you. I think
your reality is constructed by stories that other people tell you. Like, if you don't realize that, then like you need to re-examine your perception of reality. Like, we do live in a matrix. The matrix is people manipulating your emotions, right? So again, okay, but moving on to sort of this FUD thing. As you said, we've been fighting FUD, lol, objective facts. The only objective facts are the laws of thermodynamics, but cute. I
can't believe you're going and like one-on-one with the comments right now.
Oh no,
anyone doesn't realize, Meltem's going one-on-one with the comments.
Layah, I love comments. Like, I'm the person who goes like deep. I go balls deep in the comments section. I'm like, comment 1000. I'm like, issues. Okay. Sorry. So with a FUD, right?
Yes.
Here's the issue. And here's why I think the FUD keeps coming back. It's not about facts. For people who perpetuate FUD, it's not about facts. There are still people out there who believe that if they try hard enough, like, Bitcoin will get killed. There are people out there who believe that Bitcoin will shut down, like Bitcoin was shut down by the government. And the reason the FUD comes up repeatedly is because there are people out there who don't live in the same reality we do. So if you go back 7 years, right, in early 2015, it was really only Bitcoin. Like, the Ethereum network hadn't launched yet. Yes, there had been a wave of ICOs on Bitcoin, and there were like scam coins and shit coins, but it was really only Bitcoin at the core of this community. And at that point in time, a lot of people that I would talk to would say, like, oh, Bitcoin, it's a scam, it's crazy. The overall market cap of Bitcoin was what, like maybe 500 million, 750 million, is like very small market. And so back then, right, the reality that we live in now, the beliefs people had around Bitcoin didn't exist. Over the last 7 years, right, a bunch of people on the internet have worked together to meme and like make and storytell and build and put this whole new reality into perspective and help other people shift their mindset and shift their mental models to accept Bitcoin. So now the army of Bitcoiners, I like to call it, has gone from like maybe 300 people. You could put all of us in a room like 7 years ago. There's not that many people. Now it's a huge community. It's global. And there are millions of people who believe in Bitcoin. And so I think there's still people out there who believe in a fundamentally different reality and just cannot accept a reality in which Bitcoin exists, which is why the FUD will continue to persist. The FUD is always some variation of the following: energy use FUD, China FUD, right? CIA, like Intel, FUD, crime, terrorism, etc. Like the FUD is the same stuff. It just keeps coming up every cycle, and there's different people pushing it. But I also think the other challenge is because we haven't in the Bitcoin ecosystem, right? Like the narratives just repeat themselves every cycle because we haven't really done a great job coming up with new narratives. What's really interesting to me, Layah, is I try making new narratives sometimes, and I'll start saying, like, for example, when the ESG stuff came up, I was like, it's not just about the E, it's also about the S and the G. And now I hear other people saying that.
Hey, look at that.
About the ability to create new narratives. But I think, again, that the FUD is just part of change being really hard for human beings. The fact that there's this alternate monetary reality and it's not a toy, right? People think Bitcoin is not real. I'm like, there's $1 trillion of economic value on an open source protocol. That's real. This is real for tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people around the world. And again, what I want to go back to is history. And this is why education, like educating yourself and learning, is so important. The most sort of tumultuous, turbulent period of history in recent history is the creation of the printing press, right? And Martin Luther and the Protestant movement, right? And the Age of Westphalia. If we think about the impact that the printing press had on the development of human society and the impact the internet has had on the development of human society, anytime we see these massive shifts where people's fundamental beliefs around the world start to change, those are periods of great change and great upheaval. And I believe we're going through one right now where we're seeing the end of one system or one way of being, where nation states are the most powerful entities in our world and define the landscape in which we operate, to a world in which nation states are no longer going to be the dominant superpowers. And I think what was so scary to people about Libra is Facebook, fully over half of the people in the world, right? Half of the population of this planet uses Facebook on a daily basis. Facebook is way more powerful than any nation state.
Of course.
Way more powerful. Google is more powerful than any nation state. And what's crazy to people, and I think what scares the shit out of people when it comes to Bitcoin, is Bitcoin has proved, like historically movements, social movements in particular, and I believe Bitcoin is a social movement in many ways, but it's the first social movement with money, right? And that's really scary because it threatens power. And I believe in the future, nation states will no longer be the only players on the geopolitical stage. It will be nation states, but it will also be communities and metaverses, right? Like there are whole groups of people who are hanging out online who believe in a totally different reality than you and I do. And by the way, QAnon in the US was simply an expression of that, right? It was a group of people believing in a very different reality. I don't prescribe to that reality, but the fact that there are a group of people who do and who believe it so much is absolutely wild. Powerful. Yeah. And what we're starting to see is like the fragmentation of our world into these different sort of narrative, like reality shards, where people occupy these different realities, these different mental spaces. And again, this is why, like, facts, yes, I believe in facts. I believe in information, but the narrative, the stories, this is what's moving people to action. And I think this is why learning how to communicate effectively is such an important skill to have, because if you're not good at communicating your ideas, if you can't find a way to get them to the market, like, then your ideas aren't useful. Or they're not, sorry, it's not useful. It's very difficult for people to act on those ideas. So again, like I could sit here in my little office, and have the best ideas in the world, but if nobody's listening to them, if nobody's sharing them, if nobody's building on them, if they're not, getting worked into the narrative, into this like narrative tapestry that gets woven every day on the internet, then those ideas aren't being utilized. And so I think a lot of times people forget, like, creation of content and creation of knowledge is one thing. Distribution and dissemination of knowledge and content is another really important skill set. And in this post-truth internet age, that is a really important muscle for us to learn to build. And then the last thing I'll add is, like, I get attacked every single day on the internet and people are always like, how do you do it? And I'm like, you just have to put on your Teflon coat. Like, you have to recognize that in order to do things that are interesting, and in order to see things before they become trends, right? My job as an investor is to do that. You're going to have to be willing to take risks and go against the narrative in order to create new narratives. And we saw this with COVID, right? Like, the whole COVID, was it created in a lab or not? Again, I have no horse in this race. I actually I'm like, whatever. It's kind of, don't care about that. Not my world. But a bunch of people were canceled last year for saying that. Now it's starting to be the consensus opinion. So I think, again, like, you have to build your own resilience. You have to remove this desire to constantly be liked or to be in consensus. But our job as humans, right? Literally all we are is meaning-making machines. We're taking in information from a bunch of different inputs. We're trying to contextualize that information based on our own experiences, our own knowledge, and what's going on around us, and then to create a new narrative or to set our perception of what reality is and what's possible in this version of reality. And I think sometimes you have to suspend disbelief. I did that 7 years ago and I got into Bitcoin. And again, I think we're at a stage where we have to ourselves suspend disbelief. Like, I think Bitcoin will do amazing things in this world that none of us ever expected, myself included. But in order for that to be possible, we have to believe it. And I worry about all of you sometimes. Like, let's be more resilient. People are so fragile. Let's be resilient. Like, we really, really are very resilient as humans. And so, you have to be willing to change your mind, which in and of itself is a really difficult skill. But I do think that over the next 10 to 20 years, the profound changes that will be inspired by Bitcoin will blow people away. I mean, I'm so excited.
I love it. No, I love it. I think your passion as well is so admirable. And I think in terms of being resilient, that passion is really necessary. But just one really, I don't know, obviously keep you too long. I know you have a flight to catch today. But one last topic I just quickly want to ask you about. I guess it's kind of comes off the back of that. Where is it going then? Because like, we have the development of CBDCs, Europe are developing that, China are developing that. I think it was Ray Dalio that said China's digital currency will totally outperform a digital dollar. Can they coexist together?
He said that. He said, sorry, can we talk about Ray Dalio for a moment? Sorry, Layah. Okay.
It's okay.
Ray Dalio literally said a digital renminbi, right? Like the Chinese CBDC will be like more competitive than Bitcoin. I'm like, I'm sorry, where the fuck is the volatility? No. Like, clearly you've never traded anything, Ray. Like, I love Ray Dalio. He's great. But like, where's the volatility? And
no, I don't. I don't think that.
I'm a trader. I started my career trading. That's never left me. Like, I see volatility, and normal people are like, "Oh my god, my portfolio's down 40%," and I'm like, I love it. I'm an animal. It's disgusting.
No, I think it's great. It's brilliant. But CBDCs, can they coexist with Bitcoin? Do you think they are created to try and compete with Bitcoin? Will it kind of confuse the average person that thinks this is a cryptocurrency?
Okay. So again, if we go back to, first of all, great question. But I think people who ask that question, right, are forgetting one fundamental thing. So I'm going to get philosophical for a moment.
I'll sit back.
No, so Layah, if I ask you, like, who are you? Tell me about you, Layah. How do you describe yourself?
Oh God. Okay. I would say that that's hard.
But how do you describe yourself?
How do I describe myself? I'd say I'm like a little nuts as well. I'd say like positive, excitable. I believe in creating a beautiful life. I believe in freedom. I believe in happiness.
Where are you from?
Like London.
Okay. And what do you do?
I do Bitcoin stuff.
Okay. So what I think is really interesting about you, so I thought you would describe yourself like, a lot of times when you ask people like, oh, who are you? Right. They'll say, my name is X.
I don't do that.
I do Y for a living. They're like, I work in finance. I don't know. And I'm from London. Right. The world that we live in,
like that.
You don't. That's why it was hard. I was like trying to make a point, but then like, of course you don't, because you're a Bitcoiner. But most people, when you talk to them, the way they define their self is by their passport, their religious identity, right? Identity groupings. So what's interesting is, like, historically, we defined ourselves on the basis of physical jurisdiction, right? These arbitrary lines that are drawn on a map, right, over which wars are fought, define who we believe we are as humans. And that's the world we've operated in for the longest time. It defines the physical jurisdiction we live in, defines what we can or can't do with our money, the markets we can or can't participate in, the knowledge we have and the knowledge that we're indoctrinated in, our worldview, and the mythology we're taught as children, right? Like, I could live 1,000 miles away from New York, and I would have a radically different interpretation of world history. Not because the facts are different, but because the mythology is different and the way we're taught is different. So physical jurisdiction for the last forever, right, throughout all of human history, physical jurisdiction has defined how we identify ourselves. We no longer live in that world. We live in a world where I no longer am obliged to be a US person. I can be whoever I want. And Bitcoin at its core, to me, has always represented choice. For the first time, I have choice. I have the ability to choose for myself what monetary system I want to belong to, what philosophical system I want to belong to, etc. And so what to me is really amazing is we live in this new era where physical jurisdiction no longer defines who we are, what we believe, what we have access to, what we can do. And so this is the most important thing. People have choice. I no longer have to be stuck, right, with the dollar. I could choose, and I have chosen, to put the majority of my net worth into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. People all around the world are choosing, right? Operative word, choosing to do this. We get to decide for the first time for ourselves what system we want to be a part of, what values we want to enforce, what stories we want to give power to. And that is so incredibly, incredibly, incredibly powerful. Here's the thing that's so interesting. If Bitcoin were a nation state, it would be one of the largest economies in the world. It would be one of the largest populations in the world, right? Hundreds of millions of Bitcoiners, trillions of dollars of economic value moving on the Bitcoin network every day. And Michael, you stole the words out of my mouth, right? Like, separation of religion and state. That's what Martin Luther was all about. And that was perpetuated, right? Again, technology played a critical role in speeding and accelerating that change through the advent of the printing press. Now, right, the next step is separation of money and state. And by the way, it's not just going to be nation states, it's metaverses, it's digital communities where people exist online. Like, this is why I read a lot of sci-fi. Sci-fi feels prescient because it's authors, storytellers, right? Storytellers, operative word, trying to articulate what the future could look like based on the technology and sort of the research that exists today. And so this is, again, what's so exciting to me is, like, if you think about what Bitcoin is at its core, yes, technology is a huge component of it. It's also philosophy. But Bitcoin at its core, in my view, is a social movement. We have to, and Osmar, totally wild. We need to suspend our disbelief, like believe in the impossible. Now, the impossible can't defy the laws of the universe, which is why I studied math in university. It's like math defines truth in our universe, and like math defines the possible, because the rules of thermodynamics have not yet been violated, right? Like, we don't have a perpetual motion machine yet. But we have this amazing creative space in which to build new narratives and new realities and new constructs of reality. And like, people just really, really, really are not able to tap into that energy. That's all I'm trying to do, Layah. Like, I'm trying to create a lot of positive energy and give people the permission, or like the hold space for people, so that they can suspend their own disbelief and see the world through a different perspective and recognize, like, the only limitation to how we live our lives. It's obviously, there are a lot of constraints, and I'm not minimizing those, but it all starts with your mind, right? Like, your mind is the most powerful force in this universe. And we now have tools to change people's minds, like helping people make money, right? Bitcoin is has a great adoption flywheel, because greed is the ultimate adoption mechanism. And I'm not saying that in a critical way, but like, if you make people money, they will be happy. So that's really the flywheel that gets Bitcoin going. And as people go down the proverbial rabbit hole, right, they find these layers and layers where they find really deep meaning and really deep understanding in all of these different fields, from mathematics to cryptography to philosophy, like economics. There's all of these layers and layers as you start peeling them back. And so there's a little bit of something for everyone in Bitcoin, which, again, sorry, now I'm simping for Bitcoin. I'm like, I love you.
It's totally okay to simp for Bitcoin, but no, I love it. I think everything at the end of the day is definitely philosophical. Everything goes back to everything that you were saying. And I think in this is why I get really frustrated with the kind of the world that we live in, is because everybody's so easy to complain. Everybody's so miserable all the time. And I think we actually live in the most privileged era, and it all comes down to technology. Technology has, of course, its disadvantages, but it has its advantages. And totally, I was talking about this on Twitter yesterday, that we are no longer now confined to where we were brought up or where we come from. I'm from England, and England, it has plenty of opportunities, but it doesn't have what America has. Nothing quite has what America has. And I work with Americans. I only work with Americans. So my career and the opportunities that I have in life are made better because I now have access to another country. And you see this in developing nations, and obviously we don't have time to get into DeFi and stuff right now, but
but wait, Layah, if I can just add to your story, right? I think the other piece is, like, you were brought up in England, right? And so you were raised in a very specific way. You were told a very specific version of history. And I think the internet, right, and the democratization of information means that you now get the opportunity to construct your own version of history and to construct your own mythology and to assemble your own stories by incorporating all of this different information. I think that's so cool. Like, think about how much your view on things has changed since you started working in Bitcoin.
I mean, just on that point, we don't need to get into it because it's another rabbit hole, but I would never regard myself as a feminist. And you'd think where I come from that I would. But when you watch people like Jordan Peterson, who's over on the other side of the world to me, I now have access to that information. It's completely changed my worldview. Since Bitcoin, I have an even stronger hostility towards state control and, given history and everything that's happened, a kind of a feeling and like a fear, you could say, that the people that my friends don't have. And that's because, I've joined this wild quote unquote cult.
And on that note, I think Peas on Frillo in the comments like summed it up the best: construct your own mythology. Yes, I think believe in the power of mythos. And again, for the fellow nerds out there, if you read about mythology and the role that mythos or storytelling has played throughout human history, I think you'll begin to appreciate the power of words, of thoughts, and their ability to influence and inspire and move and change the world and the trajectory of the world. Like, ideas are the most powerful thing. We now have more mediums than ever to disseminate those ideas. And that was really what the internet and social media were all about. And then Bitcoin takes that a step further by attaching monetary value to ideas. It's really wild. It's really exciting.
We could talk about it for ages.
It's scary, but like, it's fun. It's like, how is this the reality we live in? It's amazing.
No, it is amazing. But I feel like I could talk to you about this for ages. I wish I was going to be in Miami, but the borders are closed to the UK, unfortunately.
I'm coming to the UK in June, I believe, late June.
Let's grab a drink.
Yes, let's, and we can talk all about mythology, mythos, because you're doing mythos right here, right? Like, your show, your podcast is a way of creating a new shared mythos. You bring in different guests, and that, again, such an important thing to do, but also puts you like at the very center of narrative construction, which I think is a really powerful tool.
But I want to thank you so much. Your energy is so contagious. Everybody in the comments can feel your energy. I think it's all about positivity, and it's so refreshing because this day and age, everybody's complaining. There's so much toxicity and tribalism within the community. So it's such a pleasure just to be able to have a conversation with somebody. So thank you so much. Honestly, so refreshing. And yeah, absolutely. Let me know when you're in London and we'll grab that drink.
I'm excited. It might have to be herbal tea after Miami. I feel like I will be in like a month-long recovery. Thanks so much for having me, Layah. I know we've been meaning to do this for a long, long time. So I really appreciate you having me on. I want to say thanks to everyone in the comments for being so engaged. I love the troll box. I love the comments. If anyone wants to follow up directly on anything I said, my DMs are open. I'm at melt_dem, or if you just want to engage in the Twitter thread, always, love hearing from people, feedback, things to read, different perspectives. I think the most important thing is to challenge yourself with perspectives that don't always sit comfortably with you, and just to sit with them and be okay being in discomfort. So that's fun. Always looking for people to push my thinking, because that's how we grow and evolve. So thank you to everyone. Thanks to you for this opportunity, and don't be so bearish. Life is good, everyone. Bitcoin is good. Everything is happening, and let's write better stories. Like mythos, just one takeaway, mythos. How do we construct mythology? Think about it, talk about it, and then get to work. We have stories to write.
There you go. So we're only going to be telling bullish stories. That's it. But yeah, absolutely what Meltem said. Thank you guys so much for watching. And of course, we'll be back around the same time next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.